The heavy doors of the New Orleans Civic Auditorium creaked open just past 6 p.m., and a flood of eager footsteps spilled across its marbled floors. A line of students, press, and local citizens wrapped around the block. Most had waited hours for a seat, not because of some celebrity concert or political fundraiser, but because of tonight's showdown, a town hall, open to the public, billed as bridging generations in American politics. But everyone knew it was more than that. It was a face-off between two forces that represented two Americas. On one side, Senator John Kennedy, the seasoned Louisiana Republican, known for his deadpan wit and homespun metaphors. A man who had served decades in public office, who spoke less like a politician and more like a high school football coach who somehow ended up in Congress. On the other, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, sharp, old, a rising Democratic voice, who wore her passion like a badge of honor. With a legal mind sharpened by years as a civil rights attorney and a social media presence that made headlines weekly, she was adored by a new generation of activists who wanted reform yesterday. Stage was simple. 2 leather chairs, 1 table, a moderator. No podiums. No applause signs. Just open mics and a room packed to the rafters with expectation. The moderator, a well-respected professor from Tulane University, cleared her throat as she opened the night. "Tonight isn't a debate," she said carefully. "It's a dialogue between tradition and progress, between experience and urgency, between generations." That line landed differently for different people, but everyone leaned forward when she introduced the guests. First, Kennedy. He stood, shook her hand, gave a nod to the crowd, nothing flashy. His navy suit crisp, his demeanor calm, almost grandfatherly. He sat with one leg over the other, fingers folded, eyes scanning the crowd like a small-town lawyer reading a jury. Then Crockett. She walked in with purpose, red blazer, confident stride, sharp eyes that didn't waver. She waved briefly to the younger crowd up front. Many of them stood. Phones were already rolling. From the beginning, it felt like 2 storms moving toward each other. The first question was about engaging Gen Z in politics. Jasmine Crockett leaned into her mic. Her voice was clear, convincing, every word deliberate. "Young people are tired of politicians talking at them," she said. "They want leaders who fight, not who flirt with the status quo, who speak truth to power, not rapid in Southern charm." She didn't name Kennedy yet, but the implication hung in the air like humidity before a storm. "You want Gen Z to vote?" she continued. "Start by giving them something real, not just bumper sticker slogans. They want climate action, criminal justice reform, debt relief, not platitudes, not folksy stories." The room erupted in applause from one side. Even some older attendees gave nods of agreement. She had come to speak, and she was doing exactly that. Then came Kennedy's turn. He didn't stand, just adjusted his glasses, took a slow sip of water, and leaned toward the mic with that unmistakable Louisiana drawl. "Well now, Congresswoman Crockett makes some strong points," he said. "And I'll admit, I ain't as slick on TikTok as some folks." A chuckle rippled through the room. Even Crockett allowed the corner of her mouth to twitch. "But, see," he continued, "when I was a boy, my granddaddy told me, if you're going to talk about leading people, make sure you've actually walked with them first." He paused. The room listened. "You want to get young people engaged? Tell 'em the truth. Tell 'em it ain't always pretty. That change takes grit, not just hashtags." Another pause. The crowd was divided, but they were all listening. "Congresswoman, I respect your fire, but I don't think we inspire people by shouting. I think we do it by showing up. Again, and again, even when the cameras are off." It was a chess move, Calm, reassuring, strategic. But then, Crockett's tone changed. She leaned into her mic again, and this time, her words cut sharper. "Senator Kennedy," she said, "with all due respect, I don't think being calm makes you qualified. And I don't think being old makes you wise." Gasps. Audible gasps. "You've been in politics longer than some of these students have been alive. And yet you've stood against nearly every major reform this generation is begging for." She rattled off his voting record. His positions on climate bills, student loans, police reform. "Frankly, Senator," she concluded, "you're out of touch. And in my view, unfit to lead the next generation." Silence. A moment where every eye in the room turned toward Kennedy, waiting for a reaction. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just sat there, then slowly placed his water bottle back on the table. "Well now," he said, "I didn't expect to be called unfit before dessert." A few nervous laughs, but Crockett didn't smile. She wasn't joking. And neither was he. He turned to face her fully now. "Congresswoman," he said evenly, "I've been called many things. Too blunt, too blunt, even too old. But unfit? That's a new one. And if you're going to make that kind of accusation in front of all these fine folks, and, Lord knows, in front of every TV and live stream watching, I reckon you'd better be ready to back it up." A quiet fell again. The tension returned. "Because I didn't come here alone tonight," Kennedy said, reaching slowly into his coat pocket. "I brought something. Something I think this room, and maybe even you, ought to hear." He pulled out a small black device. A digital recorder. Simple. Ordinary. But in that moment, it looked like a detonator. The room inhaled, collectively. Even Crockett froze, her body tightening ever so slightly. "You said I'm unfit," Kennedy repeated, tapping the device. "But what you said last month in a quiet room, without these lights, without these cameras, tells a different story." Now the crowd murmured. Phones rose. The room buzzed like a hornet's nest just rattled. Crockett leaned back slightly, jaw tight, eyes narrowed. "Senator," the moderator interjected cautiously, "are you saying you have a recording?" Kennedy looked at her, then at Crockett, then the crowd. And with the faintest smile, he said, "I reckon I do." Asterisk. And what she said when no one was listening might just change everything you think about what you heard tonight. The room sat still. No one whispered. No one blinked. All eyes were on the small recorder resting on the table between them. Harmless in appearance, but now charged like dynamite. Even the moderator, who had promised civil dialogue, looked uneasy. Senator Kennedy leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, gaze calm, but sharp as glass. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett didn't move. She didn't ask what was on the tape. She didn't demand to hear it first. She just stared at Kennedy, her eyes calculating, her jaw visibly tense. "Now, I don't like to throw punches, metaphorical or otherwise," Kennedy began, voice low and steady. "But when someone says I'm unfit to serve the people I love, well, I think the people deserve the whole truth, not just the parts that make good headlines." He clicked play. A small speaker on the recorder crackled to life. The audio was surprisingly clear, and what played next turned the packed auditorium into a vacuum. "Honestly," Kennedy's sharp, "you can't deny that," came a familiar voice. "He's one of the few who knows how to actually connect with folks. I don't agree with him, but I get why people listen to him." The crowd reacted instantly. Gasps, wide eyes, glances darting toward Crockett. It was her voice, undeniably. "He simplifies things." A voice continued. "He gets his base. But let's be real. Calling him out gets attention. That's the game. It's what people expect now. Kennedy stopped the recording there. He didn't need to say a word. The audience was already murmuring. Phones were shaking in hands as they captured Crockett's face, locked, frozen, searching for a foothold. The moderator shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Congresswoman," she began, trying to offer her a lane to respond. But Kennedy raised a hand. "Gently. No need to rush," he said, voice quiet. "Let the moment breathe. Let folks hear what they just heard." Then he turned to Crockett, his voice sharpening just slightly. "You called me unfit just now, but off camera? You said I was effective. Sharp said it was just strategy. That ain't disagreement. That's dishonesty. And I don't think this generation, or any generation, deserves that." A long silence. And then Crockett leaned forward. She didn't stutter, didn't look away. "That recording," she said, her voice controlled but firm, "was a conversation. Taken out of context. Yes, I acknowledged your skills. I believe in giving credit where it's due. But that doesn't change the truth I spoke tonight." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. "You're effective, sure. But effective at holding the door shut on progress, on climate, on justice, on student debt. If that's what sharp leadership looks like, then maybe sharp isn't what we need." Some claps, hesitant at first, mostly from the younger section of the audience. But Kennedy wasn't finished. "You say I'm holding the door shut," he replied, his words slow and deliberate. "But what I hear is that you're willing to say one thing in private and something else when the cameras roll. You think this generation doesn't notice that? They notice everything." He turned slightly to the audience. "You all can smell inauthenticity from a mile away, can't you?" Students shifted uncomfortably. Heads nodded. "It's not your passion that's the problem, Congresswoman," Kennedy added. "It's the packaging." The air was thick. Now, every breath felt slower. Every syllable hung longer. Crockett's tone grew sharper. "Let's not pretend like you're some moral compass, Senator," she snapped. "You voted against bills that would put food in kids' mouths, roofs over their heads, and stop the planet from burning. I own what I said, but don't dodge your record by playing a clip." The crowd broke again, this time louder, more divided. Kennedy raised a hand gently. "I'm not dodging," he said. "I'm just showing the fine folks here something real, something that cuts through the noise." And then, with unexpected warmth, "I don't hate you, Congresswoman. I admire your fire. But when that fire's aimed just to go viral instead of get real, well, that's when we all lose." The auditorium wasn't erupting. It was absorbing. Crockett, sensing the tone shift, tried again. "Leadership requires emotion, urgency. We're in crisis," she said, her voice rising. "I stand by my words, both the public ones and the private, because I know what young people are living through. If you want to call that contradiction, go ahead, but I call it fighting for them however I can." She looked to the crowd. "And I'm not done." Then Kennedy reached back over, clicked the recorder once more. It beeped, then stopped. "No need to play more," he said quietly, "because one truth already came through. When someone says one thing to the public and another behind closed doors, that ain't just politics. That's the problem. Asterisk. And, in just a moment, I'll share the part of the recording that even Congresswoman Crockett didn't know I had, the one that could change how every person in this room sees her next move." The room didn't breathe. Crockett sat with her shoulders squared, but her eyes told another story, shifting slightly, scanning the audience, recalibrating in real time. Kennedy, still calm, still measured, looked to the moderator and said, "Ma'am, I'd like to continue, just for a moment." The moderator hesitated, unsure if she should intervene. But the audience had already spoken. No one moved. No one blinked. Everyone wanted to hear what came next. Kennedy reached again for the recorder. "See, Congresswoman," he said, "you're right about one thing. Politics is messy. But when people trust you, that trust don't come in fragments. It comes whole." He tapped the device again. "And what comes next might just speak louder than anything said tonight." He clicked play dot, and then a second voice. The same recording. Session, but deeper into the conversation. Unfiltered. Raw Crockett again. "Look, if I play it safe, nobody notices. Kennedy's got the Southern charm thing down. He can say nothing and still win the room. So yeah, I throw a punch or two. That's the only way I get airtime." A pause. Then laughter. Not mocking. "Just tired. You think I want to go viral? No, but it's how you survive now. People don't want nuance. They want a fire to watch." Then silence. Kennedy let it play out fully, then shut the recorder off with a soft click dot. It was no longer about strategy. It wasn't even about politics anymore. It was about truth. And what that truth revealed about who we trust. And why. Crockett sat still. Her eyes didn't widen. Her hands didn't twitch. But her silence echoed louder than any words she might have chosen. And then a voice in the back of the room shouted, "Wait, was that real?" And just like that, the room erupted into a chorus of murmurs. Camera shutters, rapid-fire tweets, fingers slamming into phone screens. Social media feeds ignited like dry brush in a wildfire. Crockett, caught, was already trending. The moderator leaned into her mic, her voice tight. "Congresswoman, would you like to respond?" Crockett didn't rise. Not yet. She closed her eyes for a second, a moment that felt like eternity. Then she stood. "I'm not ashamed of being strategic," she said, her voice low, raw. "Because in today's political climate, strategy is survival." She looked to the audience, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. "You think being emotional on camera is fake? It's the only way I get your attention. The only way I cut through the noise. While people like Senator Kennedy can just exist and be listened to." Her voice cracked slightly, not from weakness, but something deeper. A wound. "So yes, I said those things. I meant them in context. And if you think that makes me unfit, so be it." The younger crowd clapped, some out of support, others out of desperation. They were watching someone fight from the edge, but the air had changed. Kennedy didn't gloat. He didn't attack. He simply stood, walked to the center of the stage, and addressed not Crockett, but the room. "I didn't play that to humiliate the Congresswoman," he said, looking around. "I played it because the truth matters, even when it's uncomfortable. We're living in a time where people pick sides before they hear the facts, where a soundbite can ruin a life, and a trending tweet can crown a leader." He turned, his voice rising just slightly. "But this is real life. These are your leaders. And what they say, behind closed doors, should match what they preach when the cameras are rolling." He looked back at Crockett. Their eyes met, and for a brief second, it wasn't anger. It was something else, not something human. He softened. "I don't doubt you care, Congresswoman," he said quietly. "But maybe it's time we all stop trying to go viral and start trying to be honest." Silence again, this time not from tension, but reflection. Crockett took a breath. "You want honesty?" she said, more to the crowd than to Kennedy. "I've watched people drown in bureaucracy, while senators in crisp suits offer calm advice. I'm not here to be calm. I'm here to wake people up. But maybe," she paused, "somewhere along the way, I forgot how." The audience was still. You could almost hear hearts breaking, not just for her, but for the state of things, for how we expect leaders to perform, and punish them for being real. Kennedy nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Then he stepped back. "Well, Maybe this moment woke us all up a little, he said, softer than before. The moderator returned to her chair, clearly shaken. I think we're going to take a 5-minute break, she announced, but no one moved. The audience didn't need a break. They needed answers, because what started as a civil political discussion was now a mirror, and everyone was staring into it. Asterisk. But what no one in that room expected was what would happen after the debate ended, when the cameras turned off, but one last confession was caught on mic. The debate officially ended at 8:27 p.m., but the real story didn't. As the stage lights dimmed and applause gave way to chatter, the crowd slowly began to dissolve. Students clustered in tense little circles. Reporters rushed to file headlines. Cameras were packed up. But the echo of that final moment still rang in the hall like a church bell, soft, haunting, unforgettable. Kennedy shook a few hands, smiled gently, declined interviews. He looked tired, but not shaken. Crockett stepped off the stage, flanked by 2 aides, head high, but her eyes distant, like she was walking out of a storm she never saw coming. Backstage, in the dimly lit corridor behind the auditorium, something happened that no one planned. A lone microphone, left hot by a student podcast crew, was still recording, and what it captured was not part of the show. In the quiet back hallway, Kennedy and Crockett crossed paths again. There were no cameras now, no audience, just 2 public servants, 2 people, standing under a flickering exit sign. Kennedy spoke first. You all right? He asked. Not as a politician, but as a man. Crockett didn't answer right away. She just looked down at the tiled floor then. Back up. I'm not mad you played the recording, she finally said. I'm mad that it worked. Kennedy chuckled, not mockingly, just honestly. Well, truth has a way of doing that, he said. Another pause. Then Crockett said something no one expected, not even herself. You were right, she muttered. I've been chasing headlines, likes, moments. She sighed, leaning against the wall. I used to care about changing policy. Lately, I've been more focused on trending clips, because it's the only time anyone listens. Kennedy didn't smile. He just nodded slowly. You ain't the first. Won't be the last, he said. But that don't mean you can't change course. Hell, even an old dog like me had to learn a few things the hard way. They stood there for a moment, 2 people from opposite worlds, now speaking the same language. Wide? You bring the recorder? Crockett finally asked. Kennedy looked her in the eyes. Because I figured sooner or later someone was going to come at me with heat. And I wanted the truth in my pocket when they did. He paused. But after hearing you just now, I think maybe it wasn't about defending myself. Maybe it was about reminding people that behind every soundbite is a soul. Crockett didn't respond. She just nodded slowly and walked away down the hallway, her red blazer disappearing into the shadows. The next morning, the headlines were predictable. Kennedy shuts down Crockett in debate surprise. Secret recording rocks political town hall. Crockett's private comments contradict public outrage. Clips of the debate exploded on social media. Kennedy's follower count doubled overnight. Cable news called it a masterclass in authenticity. Commentators, both left and right, weighed in with practiced certainty. But no one talked about what happened in that hallway. No one heard what that microphone caught. Until it leaked quietly 2 days later. A podcast called Civic Youth. Files uploaded it. Just the audio. No commentary. Just Kennedy and Crockett being human after the war of words had ended. And in a strange twist, that moment, that unfiltered, raw moment, was what truly struck a nerve. It wasn't the viral clapback. It wasn't the recording reveal. It wasn't even the win or the loss. It was the truth beneath the fight that moved people. Ah, college freshmen commented on the post. This moment backstage did more for my belief in politics than the entire debate. Another added, we don't need perfect leaders. We need honest ones. Soon, educators began using the debate, and especially the final exchange, in classrooms, not as an example of who won, but as a lesson on what leadership should be. 2 weeks later, Kennedy addressed a crowd at a small Louisiana college. Stood without notes, without press dot, and this time his tone was softer than usual. Folks, he said, I've been around the block more times than I can count. And I've learned that speeches don't stick, stories do. He looked out at the young faces. The truth is, we're all performing sometimes. But if the performance gets in the way of the purpose, then we've lost the plot. He paused, then added, authenticity doesn't mean being perfect. It means being the same person when no one's watching, as you are when the lights are on. As for Crockett, she went quiet for a while, turned down interviews, but then she released a video. Just her, sitting on the steps of her home. No makeup, no studio lighting, just her voice. I got caught chasing something that wasn't real, she said. But this moment taught me what really matters, showing up for the people who trusted to be real in the first place. And with that, her follower count began to climb again, not because of outrage, but because of redemption. Asterisk, in the end, it wasn't the debate that changed everything. It was the moment after, when two rivals, stripped of performance, stood face to face and remembered they were human first. And that, sometimes, the loudest truth is whispered in silence. Because in politics, just like life, it's not who speaks the loudest, it's who speaks the truth when no one's listening.